All right, everybody, welcome to today's meeting for the Utah Children's Care Coordination Network. We're so excited to have you here. I know summer is a busy time, and also several agencies are observing Juneteenth today. So we may not see as many on the call today, but our Juneteenth was observed Monday, so we decided to go ahead with the meeting today, and we're grateful that you all can join us. We have a really exciting panel of experts joining us today for our learning session. And we're excited to hear from them all about autism services. Oh, somebody is drawing on my screen. I don't know how that is happening. This is exciting. Let's see. I'm not sure how to stop that. Let me see if I can get it off. Hold on, let's stop. We'll do a new share here and see if we can start over again. There we go. Okay. All right, everybody. So first of all, just a few announcements and housekeeping items. So today we're going to spend the first part of the meeting on our announcements and brainstorming and case sharing, as we typically do. And then we'll move into our autism services panel. And then have a little bit of time for questions at the end. So for the panel as well, just as some, I've sent some prepared questions that our planning committee put together for the panel, but if you would also like to ask additional panel questions, if you'll put those in the chat during the panel, then I'll try to help moderate those at the end of the panel presentation as well. So just go ahead and feel free to use the chat while they're presenting. And then we'll try to get through as many of those as we can during the time we have. As always, if you can use the tools within Zoom to let us know where you're coming from, what agency you're with, and maybe your role, you can do that by clicking on this ellipses dot in the top right-hand corner of your picture and add your agency and your role to your name. Then we can kind of get to know each other. And if you can join us by camera, we love seeing everybody's face and who's on this call. So that would be great. A few announcements. As always, we want to remind you about the Spark study. It's always ongoing, and you can enroll families as you come across those with new diagnoses. Especially, we always love to see if we can recruit as many people as we can into the Spark study. And then I just wanted to repeat a few announcements from our from last month's meeting as well, since they're still current. So we the Intermountain Transition Conference that happens annually has a film festival component this year, for specifically open for youth that are of transition age, so ages 12 to 22. They're encouraging youth to document some part of their transition process, whether it's like picking up their own medication for the first time, or calling and setting their own appointment, making a little video about that experience, and then submitting it into this film festival contest. And that is open. Submissions are open through August, so encourage you to encourage families to participate. And then coming up next weekend is the Utah Parent Center's Family Festival, which should be a really fun event. And again, encourage you to invite any families you know that may be interested in attending that as well. All right, so for some medical home portal updates, we've had a lot of content updates this last month and on a lot of different topics. You can see them listed here, and anything with the FAQ behind is one specifically written for a parent audience. The others are more clinical focused. And then we've had some specific updates to the Utah Children's Care Coordination Network page that's found on the medical home portal, as well as the Utah Projects page. And then I wanted to highlight some content on the medical home portal that's relevant to our topic and panel today. So we'll have we'll kind of be covering within the topic of autism will be covering diagnostic services, advocacy services, and then transition and independent living services. And so I wanted to highlight some pages that you may want to do some additional reading on and or use as patient education resources in the future. Pages that can be found on the medical home portal. So we have advocacy and finding your voice. There is a full diagnostic module on autism spectrum disorder. There's also a frequently asked questions page on autism, which again is written typically by parents or caregivers who have of somebody who has autism. And so they're from that parent perspective. Screening, testing, diagnostic process. This is a family page as well that helps orient parents to what screening tests involve and the different kinds of things that they might go through. There's a page on self-advocacy, and then we have a whole section on transition to adulthood as well. And I just want to show one additional thing here. I'm going to bring my other screen over. So again, when you're searching these topics, the search bar at the top of the page is one of the most common ways to search for things. So if we just search the term autism, you can find a lot of these topic pages, and it'll also tell you what section it's in, and you can filter by section. So if you're like, I really just want content for families, you can filter down by content specifically for families here. Or if you're like, no, I'm actually looking for some more clinical support information, you can filter that way as well. And then our services directory also has a host of resources as well in local areas. All right, so that's content from the medical home portal. I want to open it up now to brainstorming and case sharing. So this is your time to share any cases with the group, resources, announcements, anything like that. And the time, I'll just be quiet for a little bit, and if you're welcome to unmute yourself and go ahead and speak up.
This is Dora from Shriners. I'm the liaison for the Northwest for Shriners. I just wanted to highlight, because it is summer, our fracture hotline. A reminder to anyone out there, or if you don't know about it, then it can be new news. And I'll send the PDF information to Athena, but it's a triage line, so it's a cell phone that you can call directly. And they will triage, splint, cast, if they need surgery, post-fracture follow-up. It's Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 4. And if needed, if they need a day of appointment, then they can schedule it the day or next day. And they take all insurances, Medicaid, non-insured, regardless of the family's ability to pay. But it is a cell phone, so you can call the nurse to triage to see if they're a good candidate. It's not an ER, but if it's something that's been they've been seen in the clinic and they've been seen by the doctor and they need follow-up for that, then that's a good time. But you can call, and then I'll put the basic information on the chat, and then I'll send the PDF information to Athena. Thanks.
Thank you, Dora. We always love updates from Shriners and reminders about all the good services that they offer.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah. Anyone else have a case that you want to bring, or questions for the group? I know there was a lot of information going around about respite care services on the listserv this last week, which was really great. Okay, well, if we don't have any other cases for today, we'll go ahead and move into our panel. I know some of our panelists are not able to join us until 9, and so this is getting a little bit, we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but that's all right. Well, it'll leave lots of time for questions at the end. So I'll go ahead and move into introducing our panelists for today, and then we will hear from each of them for a brief overview of the agency that they represent and some of the services they provide to those with autism. And then we'll move into, like I said, I have some prepared questions that we sent out to the group ahead of time that they'll take turns answering. And then if you have any additional questions, we'll go ahead and filter through those in the comments. So for today's panel, we have, like I said, we have people representing advocacy services, diagnostic services, and then transition and independent living services today. And so for advocacy services, we have Eric Stoker, who's an information specialist with the Utah Developmental Disabilities Council. And for diagnostic services, we have Ashley Stewart, who's a clinical psychologist with the University Developmental Assessment Clinics. And we also, for transition and independent living services, we have Carrie Bushman, who's the community engagement officer with Scenic View Academy. And so we may go slightly out of order here because I see that Carrie is on. Do you mind starting, Carrie?
No, I'm fine. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, perfect. So Scenic View Academy, we are a nonprofit transitional school for young adults with autism. So we take students at 18 through about 30 and help them make that transition from living at home with mom and dad, going to high school or whatever, to, you know, living on my own, having a job, being a member of the community, being responsible for myself, all of those things. So we are the most holistic program in the state because we do all of those things. We do employment, we support mental health, we work on building relationships and healthy sexuality. We have recreation training of different things there are to do in the community other than play video games. We have an academic department that helps students either with entrance exams to university or helps them with university classes that they're taking. And we work in a step. So when students start on campus, everything is on campus. They live on campus, they work on campus, they play on campus, and we employ them so that they have money to work with. So they have money to learn budgeting with and those kinds of things. And then our second stage is we have a small apartment complex on our property. So students go from living in the dorms to living in an apartment by themselves with Scenic View still there to provide support if needed. And then we have an intermediate employment step, which is internships with actual employers in the community where we pay the wages of the individual and the business agrees to take the individual on and kind of show them the ropes and give them feedback on their work skills. And then final step is job in the community, apartment in the community, living in the community, being a part of the community. So that's us.
Great, thank you, Carrie. And does anyone have any initial questions for Carrie just regarding the services specifically at Scenic View Academy?
I forgot to mention we're in Provo.
I think that was one of the questions that just popped up in the chat was where are you located?
Yeah, we're in Provo.
I have a question. Hey, Carrie, nice
Hi.
to see you. I wanted to ask, how do students get in? And what does the payments look like or the tuition? How does that work?
Okay, so admissions go through our website, Scenic View, it's svacademy.org. And we have an admission page where they fill out an initial kind of questionnaire to make sure that they're a good fit for us. We don't accept students with histories of violence or severe mental illness like suicide, ideology. They have to be a year past that. Suicidal ideation, that's the word I was looking for. And then we are lucky enough that we were founded by the Nordas, and I'm sure you're familiar with that name. They do a lot of things in the community, very generous family. And they founded Scenic View, they donated the land, built the buildings, and then they left us endowment that we use for student scholarships, because one of the things that the founders wanted was to make sure that we weren't turning people away based on their ability to pay. So part of the admission process is submitting financial information to a third party, and they come back and say, okay, based on, because the programming the students get is like $100,000 a year. I mean, it's just, and very few families can afford that. And so all of our students at this point right now, 100% of our students are scholarshiped in some way. So I can't give you an exact amount because it varies by family.
We had another question, Carrie, come in through the chat that's asked if this is only for those who have autism diagnosis or for anyone with intellectual disability.
Autism and neurodiversity that is debilitating. So like severe ADHD, OCD, intellectual disability, it might not be a good fit because living independently should be a realistic goal, because that's what we're helping them work toward. And so if, depending on, so most of our students are average intelligence. I think we go as low as 70 for IQ. But if they're too intellectually disabled, then we don't know how realistic living independently is for them.
And there was another question about whether or not there's a wait list.
There is a wait list, but we do move through it pretty quickly. So it just kind of depends on what the timing is for the family and for Scenic View. We try to coordinate, make sure it works for both families or both organizations. So, I'd say at any given time, our wait list is like 8 to 10. It's not too bad. You can get in within a semester or so.
What is the average length of stay?
Average length of stay is 2 to 3 years. Other questions?
Harry, this is Eric Christensen with THHS. I was fortunate enough to get to tour the new facility, the apartments. Yes, and my question was for people. I mean, I realize that's a limited facility that you have. What about helping with trying to once folks leave Scenic View, do you help them try to find housing in other places? I mean, obviously that's a limited facility there. Do you try to help them find housing in the community or other avenues like that?
So we do have an alumni program, and I'm the alumni coordinator, where with autism, it tends to be that like when one domino falls, the rest fall pretty quickly. And so the goal of our alumni program is to catch that first domino when it falls. So I've lost my job, or my boyfriend broke up with me, or whatever it is that's causing them stress in their life. We don't want all the dominoes to fall. We just want to fix that one. And so if they're a graduate of Scenic View, they can reach out anytime, and we'll help plug, so if they lost their job, we'll say, okay, let's get you connected with an employment person, and they can help you do some hunting and spice up your resume and all of that kind of stuff, so that we can get them hopefully back into the workforce quickly, rather than letting that unemployment turn into depression, turning into, I lost my apartment because I don't have any money, that all those dominoes falling. So yeah, all of our services can be provided a la carte to alumni. So at the school, you pay tuition and you get all the services. And then as an alumni, you just kind of pay a la carte as you go. So if you need employment, you just pay for employment. If you need, a therapist, you pay for therapy. And so it's a way that we can kind of spread our resources out a little more and help folks that aren't just our current students. And so I've had everything from, Carrie, I got in a car accident, what do I do? To I've lost my job, to I've locked myself out of my apartment. Any kind of, support that they need as an alumni, they're all, they all have my cell phone number, and they contact me when they can, and we try to get them back on track.
Great. Any other questions for Carrie? Our two other panelists are not on yet, which is unfortunate. It's just that we're just gonna hang out here for a second and hope that they join in the next few minutes. But we're so glad that you could share with us, Carrie, and sorry to put you on the spot first like that. But
Okay.
while we're waiting for them to join, does anybody else have any other announcements or questions, cases they want to bring up? Kendra asked another question about how many students stay in each dorm.
So each student has their own room, so they have their own space. And in the dorms, we have room for about 30. And then we have room for another 30 or so in our apartment complex that's there. So we usually have about 30 students living in the dorm, 30 students living in the apartments, and then others that are either making the transition to Scenic View or making the transition to living in the community. So we typically have about 70 to 80 students at a time.
When students transition to maybe out into the community, what are some of the places that they're going, just to give a broader sense of what some of the other resources are for transitioning and independent living? So
housing is such a challenge. It's one of the biggest challenges, especially, the housing market in Utah is such a nightmare. And then you add to that a disability, and it's a real challenge. We work very closely with the Provo Housing Authority that helps with funding for housing. They accept students they have to have SSI, so they have to have that disability designation from the government to get housing subsidies. A lot of them go to school, like they go straight from Scenic View, they've been maybe taking classes at BYU or UVU and Scenic View at the same time, and now they are transitioning to just university. And some of them do like student housing, which is a more affordable way, but also really difficult emotionally for a lot of our students, because living with people you don't know, and that there's so much social involved in that a lot of them struggle with that, but some of them do just great with it. I'm trying to think of what other, Wasatch Mental Health is available for case management. Things like if a student just cannot manage their money, they can get a caseworker at Wasatch and they'll help them with paying their bills and things like that. They do have mental health services available. We also provide those at Scenic View, and there's a discount for alumni. So a lot of our alumni choose to come and use our mental health clinic at Scenic View Academy. Other resources that they use. One thing that we've created this past couple years is we've opened an apartment building. It was a cooperative project between Provo City, investors, us, and the Housing Authority, where there's an apartment building downtown Provo that has 30 apartments for autism and 30 apartments for elderly. And those tend to be populations that jive pretty well because none of them are very loud or partying or extra social. And so we've had that open for a year, and it's been fun to see how when you can get a group of them together, when they're not the odd one out in whatever situation they're in, but they're in a group of folks like them, they can be very social. We have an anime club, and we have several Dungeons and Dragons campaigns that happen on various nights. We have a dinner group that there's 5 people in the group, and they all take a night of the week to cook for the others, so that they're only having to cook and do dishes one night a week, and then they get fed the rest of the week. And so they have been doing a really good job of working together and finding that balance of work and, social and living in the community. I lost my train of thought. Sorry, I'm an ADHDer, so sometimes I wander off. But
We had another question come into the chat about whether or not do you have students who are diagnosed all the way from toddler age up to those who were maybe just recently diagnosed or diagnosed in adulthood?
Yeah, we do have both. Some that are fairly new to the diagnosis and are still kind of shell-shocked and learning, or others that have, got diagnosed as a child and they've kind of been raised with that autism label and knowing what it means for them. What does family involvement look like? We ask that the student have someone, whether it's both parents or one parent or an aunt or an uncle or a grandparent, somebody that's kind of their point person that the student will they have a service coordinator, which is kind of like a case manager that they call, with the case manager, they call their parents about once a week and just kind of check in with their folks and say, here's what I'm doing in this class, and here's what I'm doing in this class, and here's, maybe a success story that I had this week. Here's what I'm struggling with. And so the parents are pretty involved in knowing where their student's at, but it's also a transitional period for the parents learning not to take over. It's really hard for some parents to give their student the steering wheel and let them kind of choose what their next steps are. So it is kind of a transition time for the parents as well. And we encourage when the student is reporting back to parents, instead of the parents saying, oh, well, don't, you need to do this and you need to do this. It's more of, how can I help you? We try to transition them into that of like, how can I support you? How can I help you with that goal? And so it's kind of a collaborative effort between the family, the student, and the family, the student, and the school, basically.
Is there specific like support for the parents that may be struggling, like any counseling, or do you guys refer them out to anybody?
Yes, we do have, our clinic does have like parent or family therapy for families who are really struggling. And any of the families can request family counseling at any time. And that's provided through our Scenic View Clinic and the clinical services. So was there another question that I missed?
I think that was everything that came in through the chat, and our other two panelists are on now, so we are
Okay,
gonna
good.
turn some time over to them. Thank you everyone for helping us fill the time with your great questions there. So we have both Ashley Stewart and Eric Stoker on as well now. We're gonna have Ashley go next and give a little bit of an overview of university developmental assessment clinics in general, and then and diagnostic services in general. And then we'll have Eric go, and then like I said, we'll open it up to those questions that we have. So Ashley.
Sure. Thanks for having me. As Athena said, I'm Ashley Stewart. I am
Oh.
a child. Oh,
Sorry, I thought I said your name wrong. I'm so sorry.
did you?
I think I did. Anyway, go for it.
I didn't even notice. Yeah. I'm Ashley Stewart. I am a child and adolescent psychologist in the Department of Pediatrics at the University of Utah. My primary clinical practice area is with the University Developmental Assessment Clinics. Within the University Developmental Assessment Clinics, we have kind of three major programs that are all diagnostically focused, yet see a variety of different populations. One of those programs is the neonatal follow-up clinic. In that program, we are following the development of young children who have had either significantly premature birth, very low birth weight, or were born with a specific brain injury at the time of their birth. And we follow their development at regular intervals, conducting some screening testing, starting as young as 3 months of age, and then following them up until they're about 4 years old. The second program that we have under UDAC is the Heart Center Neurodevelopmental Program. Similar to the neonatal follow-up program, the Heart Center Neurodevelopmental Program is a screening clinic specifically for children who have congenital heart conditions. They're also seen longitudinally at different time points, beginning kind of in the toddler years, followed at like a school aged, and then aging out around age 8 in that program. And then lastly, we have, I think the reason that I was asked to come here, which is our child development program. The child development program is really our big diagnostic program that we have. We're a multidisciplinary clinic. So in addition to psychologists like myself, we also have a team of pediatricians. We have nurse practitioners, we have occupational therapists, physical therapists, speech language pathologists. I think that gets all of us, yeah. And we all really work together as a team and conduct kind of multidisciplinary evaluations of children who are at risk or suspected of having developmental disabilities. As you can imagine, when we have developmental delays, majority of the children who are referred to our clinic are referred for an autism evaluation. And so within the autism diagnostic branch, we have the psychology team as well as the pediatric team conducting diagnostic evaluations. We are currently, piloting lots of different programs to try to increase access to the limited diagnostic clinicians that there are. and both in our clinic as well as statewide. So we do a lot of pilot programs to see if we can try to get kids in faster, try to triage children who have kind of more overt symptoms of developmental delay or autism. We're currently have a couple grants to train community pediatricians to diagnose young children with autism to hopefully try to offload some of the kids who are waiting on our wait list. But that's kind of the I guess 1,000-foot view of UDAC. I'm happy to answer questions as we kind of continue.
Yeah, actually, so we'll take a few questions specific about university developmental assessment clinics, just like we did just barely for Carrie, with specific to the services offered at Scenic View. So if anybody has any specific questions for Ashley about the services that UDAC offers, we can go ahead and do a couple of those now.
I forgot to mention too, we do have a very, very small treatment branch under the Child Development Program. We are hoping to continue to expand that as we grow and grow. But currently we have a child apraxia of speech clinic that's run by one of our speech language pathologists, Kate Hahn. We also have a couple parent mediated interventions. I run one of those. It's called the Ruby Parent Training Program. It's focused on children who have moderate challenging behaviors, and we train the parents on how to hopefully prevent some of those challenging moments, as well as teach their child new skills to replace the challenging, really communicative behaviors with a more functional, more adaptive skill. We also have a social skills program, which is run by another psychologist, Emily Parker. She does the peers social skills program. She does that on a one-on-one basis. And then two of our speech pathologists, Dory Harris and Hannah Maris, do a caregiver coaching model to build social communication skills. It's a program that is modeled off of Project Impact, if any of you have seen or heard of that particular therapy program, but it's really geared towards really young toddlers who have social communication deficits. And again, teaching the parents skills to hopefully build and expand their social communication and play skills.
Great. Any specific questions for Ashley? All right, we will turn the time over to Eric Stoker.
Great, thank you so much, Athena. My computer didn't want to work in Zoom this morning, so I had to use my iPad today. So as Athena mentioned, my name is Eric Stoker, and I'm the information specialist for the Utah Developmental Disabilities Council. And some of the services we offer is we offer a lot of advocacy services for people with autism. One of our services we offered is the Advocates as Leaders Speakers Network. And what that is we are a group of speakers with developmental disabilities who go out and train parents, family members, siblings, professionals, and community members, and other self-advocates all about the lives of the issues that they face each and every day. And we go out and we go out and train, and we go out and do different presentations. Like we offer support decision making, we talk about self-determination, autism, and we talk about all different topics. And some of our other advocacy services we offer is we also offer role-playing skills to help people with disabilities to actually talk to their lawmakers about what's been happening and issues in their community. And we also offer, I'm trying to think of all the programs we offer, but we also offer, it's kind of hard to remember because we have so many programs we offer though, because we offer, there's Take Your Legislature to Work, which is a program that we used to offer, which had a person with a disability take their lawmaker to work, and they would actually come and sit with them for about an hour and a half and get to see from their point of view what they do for work and do many other things. We also offer, oh my goodness, we also offer our main council, which is the Utah Developmental Disabilities Council. We accept self-advocates and their families to come and sit on our board and come and learn more about what's happening in the state of Utah and what's happening across the nation as well. So it's kind of the services that we offer.
Thank you, Eric. Does anyone have any specific questions for Eric about some of the programs that are offered at the Utah Developmental Disabilities Council? All right, well, as I said earlier in the meeting, I've sent some prepared questions to this group of panelists ahead of time. And they are these 4 questions that we'll just spend a little bit of time discussing. And, you know, we would love to hear your responses from all of you, but if you don't feel like the question is particularly pertinent to you, we'll move on. But as we're talking about these questions, anyone in the group can also submit questions through the chat, and we'll try to get through as many of those as we can as well. But the first question for our panel today is, what advice do you have about how to manage parents who may have a fixed belief on what normal development should look like?
I'm guessing this is like the developmental specialist question. So
I mean, it could. I think it could apply to anyone too. And Eric, I know you, like, if you have any personal experience too, this might be really applicable as well. So we'd love to hear from any and all of you on this question.
Well, I guess from someone who is assessing a child's development perspective, I really try to help parents understand how difficult it is to really get a sense of what is quote unquote normal in terms of development. There's such a wide range in regards to meeting different developmental milestones that it's pretty easy to get fixated on one particular milestone falling later than another. It's also challenging in that we know that as much as we as parents want development to be this straight line trajectory, that's just not how development works. There's kind of this jagged ebb and flow when it comes to development. So in kind of reading this question too, one thing that really stuck out to me was the kind of managing parents. And I think as someone who works with parents on a day-to-day basis, I find establishing rapport with parents to be one of the most critical pieces before entering into any sort of therapeutic relationship with a family, even when you are specifically targeting the child and what their child's development is like. It's helpful to understand the parents, what their knowledge of development is, not only in their own child, but just broadly, understanding culturally what factors they expect from their child in terms of their regular interactions in their home. It's not all that uncommon for me to have parents who have developmental disabilities themselves and are, trying to understand how their child's development is in relation to their own lived experiences. So I think especially taking time to really understand the parent and kind of guiding conversations from there can be really helpful in having these conversations.
I guess I can go next to Athena because I was thinking about what Ashley was talking about, because Ashley and I go way back and stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So I was thinking about like before I was diagnosed with autism, because when I got diagnosed with autism, that was when my mom figured out, because I was only 2 when they diagnosed me with a developmental delay. And my mom was like trying to figure out like what my disability was like, what was it going to look like? And she couldn't figure it out because we didn't know we had autism, because when I was born in 1987, we didn't know what autism was at the time. And so we kept going through all these different milestones. Like I actually went through like diagnostic kindergarten, diagnostic special preschool. I went through all of this and then we still didn't have an answer. And then finally, by the time I turned 7, my mom and I went up to the University of Utah. They actually did some more testing on me, and they finally found a solution. And they said, your son has a moderate form of autism. And my mom was like, oh my gosh, finally we have an answer. And we still didn't know about autism, but But from my mom's perspective, we still learn about autism each and every day though, because I tell people I have a disability and they're like, oh no, I'm sorry. I'm like, I have to tell people, I say, it's okay, it's a part of me, but I'm still a normal person just like you and me, because it's hidden. You can't see I have autism though.
Okay. um, kind of going along with what Eric said, labels are not a bad thing. One of the big differences between kids getting diagnosed early or later is the parents are afraid of the label. I don't want to label my child. But imagine if you went to the grocery store and there were no labels on any of the cans. Like, labels are useful because they give access to services and they give the individual understanding. You know, the kids that are diagnosed earlier have a better sense of who they are and what they need as an autistic person. Because, you know, if we don't help them with a label like autism, they're going to label themselves. They're going to be, and it's going to be, you know, they're broken, or there's something wrong with me, or I'm weird, or, you know, because they're going to get labeled either way. But if we can give them a productive label, like a diagnosis where they can learn about it and study it and seek out other autistic people, that really helps them. So that's some advice that I'd want to give parents. And also just the idea of sometimes the phrase special needs kind of shoots us in the foot, because their needs really aren't any different than a normal human being's or a typical human being, but the route that they take to achieve that goal or that milestone is different. So rather than having, you know, labeling them special needs, maybe, you know, special route is it, because they can do it. They just need to do it in their own time and in their own way. And, you know, when at a time that works for them, when they can do it. And even then, nobody's perfect and nobody can do everything. One of our program directors at Scenic View is an autistic gentleman. And he, you know, he's been on government councils and he's on the Disability Council for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He speaks all over the country. He, you know, is the program director of our school, but he doesn't drive. You know, and imagine if his parents had gotten hung up on him being able to drive. You know, it kind of pales in comparison, I guess you would say. Same with my best friend is autistic, and she's put herself through grad school, and she's an autistic therapist, and she has all these wonderful things, but she's never lived away from home because that is just too scary for her. So we just need to be more, I don't know, more forgiving, or more like, not lower your expectations, but maybe change your expectations of, like, in the grand scheme of things, how important is driving? If there's other ways to get around, maybe it's not that important that we want to make the child feel like a failure over it, if that makes sense.
I think to really piggyback off of what you're saying, Carrie, too, I think it's really important for families to understand that development is an individual process. While we can talk about normatively in, you know, the larger population, what development should ideally look like, what I want families to really focus on is the trajectory of their particular child. Progress is always progress, even if that progress is, you know, quote unquote, slow as compared to other children their age. I'm always going to look at, are they going in the direction that we want them to go, upwards? Versus having any sort of regression and things like that. And when we see those slips in development, are there more supports that we could offer to help keep that progression going forward?
A phrase I once heard used to describe autism, and I think it was in an academic setting, was spiky profile, meaning, they're really ahead of their peers in this area, but maybe behind their peers in this area. And I just think I've always joked that would make a great band name. It'd be like, hey, we're spiky profile. Because it really, just because they're not hitting certain benchmark doesn't mean they're not way above their peers at this benchmark. It just kind of depends on the individual. So I like that focus on what progress for the individual looks like.
Thank you everyone so much for your input on that question. We'll move to the next question. What kind of support is available for parents, caregivers, and maybe siblings?
I can go first, Athena, if that's okay with you. So there's a bunch of support out there. The first support I would think of is the Utah Parent Center, and they are a really great support for parents and siblings, because the Parent Center offers so many resources for parents who are trying to find their journey when they find out their son or daughter has a disability. And they also offer sib shops, which is for the siblings with disabilities. And so the Utah Parent Center is a great resource, and they are amazing. And I recommend them though, because we're actually next door to them. And then each time I go over there as part of their board of directors meetings, I always see parents coming in and asking for help and getting all these amazing resources. That's one kind of support I think would be amazing.
Yeah. So Utah Parent Center is one that we often recommend after diagnosis. We also connect them with Utah Family Voices. At UDAC, we have a representative from Utah Family Voices, Eileen Christensen, who gets to know our families particularly well and then connect them with services. We also have nurse care managers and doing some care coordination along with integrated services at the Department of Health to make sure that after the diagnostic process is over, that the families are able to connect with the services that they may benefit from. And that includes giving options for things like sibling workshops, parent workshops. We also recently started a parent education series that we're doing on a quarterly basis. Athena, I'd love to share a flyer with your group just so we can get the word out bigger, more and more.
Yes.
But the idea is that we bring families together with professionals in the community to have discussions around particular topics every quarter. So we've been hosting them at the Primary Children's Auditorium this past month. We talked about toilet training, it was just last week. We've also done things like sleep. Upcoming sessions are on behavior as well as transition to adulthood. So those are really great opportunities, not just for parents who have just received an autism diagnosis, but for families kind of regardless of where they're at in their journey with autism. I mentioned that we have some parent training programs, and I'm a big advocate for parent-mediated interventions. Parents get to spend a lot of time with their children, and those hours can be really beneficial for helping children who may be struggling to communicate and are reliant on exhibiting more externalizing behaviors instead of communication. I also would say that it does a really great job at helping to rebuild a dynamic between the parent and child when the parent kind of understands a little bit more about why the behaviors occur, what triggers the behaviors, and how to manage the behavior. So we see parent stress start to decrease when they feel like they have the tools to manage these more challenging moments in the home. And then kind of off that, I also recommend while parents are, doing therapeutic services, be it ABA or things like that, that they make sure and be involved in their child's therapy. I believe at a minimum, parent training is incorporated into ABA services for at least an hour a month. And so I really encourage families at the diagnostic feedback session to take advantage of that. And even though an hour a month isn't a lot, I think it can be really helpful for the parents to be able to replicate what's happening in their therapeutic services at home.
Great, and we have had some activity in the chat while you're speaking. Natalie Allen was wondering if the toilet training presentation you just did is available by recording.
It is not yet. We just did it. It was last Wednesday, but it will be, and as well as our last session on sleep. And at this time, they're going to be housed on the Utah Parent Center website. So as soon as I have that information, I'll pass it along to you guys, and you can watch our past recordings. I should also put a plug in for the fact that the Child Life program at Primary Children's has been integral in making this little parent education series a success, in that they have child life specialists who offer childcare for free while the parents come and attend the sessions. So that's been really game changing, I think, for increasing access for some of these families to come to something like this.
Great. We'll definitely distribute your flyer about those. That sounds great. And then in addition to some of the programs that were mentioned about Utah Parent Center, somebody put in the chat, the Transition University offered through them is also a really great resource for parents as well. Carrie, did you have anything, did you want to add to that question?
I don't really have too much to add, because our focus is helping them kind of pull away from parents and become more independent. So other than the Utah Parent Center, who do fantastic work, yeah, I don't have a whole lot to add.
Great. Okay, let's move on to our next question. So what potential solutions or opportunities are available for children and youth without a formal diagnosis?
I'll start. I was also about to answer a question in the chat, which was around interpretation for the CAP presentations. Connecting Autism Parents and Providers is what CAP stands for. Currently, they are only available in English, but we are hoping to have future iterations at least offered in Spanish, because we know that there is significant demand for that. We have, at this point in time, kept them live and in person because one of the big goals of that format is to make real life connections with one another, have families meet other families, and that's just something that we're not quite able to consistently replicate on Zoom yet. So that's limited some interpretation offerings. In terms of opportunities for children who haven't yet been diagnosed, I'm glad this question got asked, because this was something that came up a lot in our clinic. I'm sure many of you know that we have a reputation for having a long wait list, and families have to wait a long time to get in to see us. And so I really want families to know that they can be proactive while they're waiting for a diagnosis. And there's actually lots of things they can do to support their child, especially if you start to look at the things that you're concerned at on an individual level. So really diving down to the individual symptoms versus thinking about the presentation of autism as a whole. So for example, one of the most common reasons children are referred to our clinic for an autism evaluation is because they have a speech and language delay. you can get evaluated for a speech delay, either through different private companies. You can use the early intervention birth to 3 program to have a broader developmental evaluation. You can do, the primary children's satellite clinics and start speech therapy while you're waiting for an autism diagnosis. Same thing we recommend doing if children have sensory processing concerns, hooking up with an occupational therapist and starting some occupational therapy to work on those areas of deficit. School-based services are really great for kind of bridging that gap. So if a child's 3 years of age or older, having them evaluated by the school district to see if they would qualify for school-based services. For those who are under age 3, of course, connecting to Baby Watch and the early intervention program. One thing that I've also been particularly passionate about is increasing access to behavioral therapies for children who don't have a formal autism diagnosis. And so currently the parent training program that I do, the Ruby parent training program, is not dependent on a particular diagnosis. What really qualifies a child for that therapy is that they have moderate amounts of challenging behavior that the parent needs help with. So I'm able to see children who have ADHD, children who have global developmental delays, children who have genetic conditions, not just children who have a formal diagnosis of autism. Same thing when it comes to just broad mental health concerns. If you have concerns that your child may have anxiety, depression, things like that, those are not barriers to entering into mental health counseling either. You can seek out a counselor who specializes in things like anxiety in young children and start those services and start treating that symptom while you're waiting for a formal diagnosis. I should also put a plug out there because I think we would all agree that this barrier to behavioral therapy that is based on a child having a particular diagnosis is not something that I think most of us who work in this field feel is right, because we know many children without autism diagnosis who would benefit from some of the services that are right now really isolated to children with autism. So I think at the kind of larger level, advocating for access to things like ABA therapy for children, regardless of an autism diagnosis, is something we could all do to help kind of move that barrier.
Eric or Carrie? Oh yeah, Carrie, do you want to add to that question?
Mine, so I'm coming from a transition perspective, right? Not a child perspective, but just involve your child in your life. We get a lot of students who, are starting Scenic View at 20, 25, and are very unaware of how the adult world works. They, we have a public transportation class, and there's always one kid on the first day of the semester that raises his hand and says, "Oh, I don't need this class. My mom takes me everywhere I need to go." They are shocked when they learn that they have to pay for internet service, or that electricity is something that you pay for, because so much of that is invisible, and it's just there, and they don't ever think about where it comes from or how it works. Things like budgeting, they assume that their parents bought their house, and like you buy a video game and paid for it, it's done. They have no awareness of mortgages, or that their parents have a budget, or that people. Another question students often give us is, we have an intro to apartment living that talks about all the rules in your lease and things like that. And again, we always get that student that raises their hand and says, "Well, I'm not going to live in an apartment. I'm going to live in a house." We're like, yeah, eventually you'll live in a house, but starting out, you can only afford an apartment. And people who live in apartments do that because it's less expensive. It's not because they want to live with 6 other students or whatever, so just kind of explaining some of those basic why we do things the way we are, and see, kind of check their awareness and kind of help them fill in gaps of like, this person is doing this because this is what they can afford, not because they like apartments and they want to live in an apartment. Does that make sense? So just involving them in your day-to-day and why you make the decisions you do. And, if you're comfortable, let them in on your budget and how much you spend on housing and electricity and internet and all those kind of things that they just assume just show up.
Eric, did you have a response for that question?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this. So I think also the other thing I was thinking about was social activities and stuff, like have them meet other people with disabilities and have them have that interaction with others and have them make friends. Because a lot of times I've noticed is that sometimes they get these relations. A lot of times I've talked with people and they said dating's one of their things, being interactive with other people in their community kind of makes them a little nervous though, because they don't know what they're going to expect out of a relationship or what this activity is going to involve. And one of the things I've learned is also try to find those skills that they are really, really good at for when they get out of, like what Kari mentioned, scenic view, like find those great job skills they're really good at and help them find those jobs as well, though, when they figure out their diagnosis of autism.
That's great. Thank you. All right, we'll move into this last question, which I know is a big one, and we could probably spend the whole meeting addressing it, but we'll do the best we can in the time we have left. So what do you see as the most common barrier to accessing autism services across the lifespan? Who wants to tackle that one first?
All of them, but all of the barriers, there are many. I'll say from, kind of the perspective of just many services being dependent on an autism diagnosis, a lack of providers who are able to diagnose autism. There are very few of us, and that's why we have really long wait lists. So I am excited about programs that we have to try to, train other providers to identify autism earlier, so that we can at least hopefully get younger children connected to services sooner. But I think that's certainly a large barrier. And I think that translates over to just autism services in general, including like therapeutic services, behavioral-based services. It's become a large business, right? So a lot of times, like the models that have been created for some of our evidence-based therapy are based more on running a business and less so about what fits into a family's lifestyle. So families are being asked to commit to 30 to 40 hours a week of therapy, and parents have to work, and their children need to go to school and things like that. And so finding that balance that really works for their family, I think, is another large barrier for many, many.
Harry or Eric, did you want to add to that question at all?
There was a question that popped up for Ashley, so I was
Okay.
let her answer that.
Ashley, Ingrid asked where you can find more information about training for physicians regarding being able to diagnose autism.
Yeah, so I am happy to share information about it. I'll tell you kind of broadly, we're in the process of like creating a website that would detail all these programs I've kind of talked about right now. But broadly speaking, Dr. Paul Carbone, Dr. Michelle Villalobos, myself, as well as some other folks at UDAC have a grant with the Intermountain Foundation called the Aspire Project. It's autism services, personalized integrated, research-informed, and empowering. And our goal through this larger grant is to essentially build systems of care for individuals with autism throughout the state of Utah. And so one tiny kind of branch of that is this pediatric training program. We call it right now our Advanced Autism Echo Network. And so currently, the way physicians have kind of joined into our cohort is they've either completed the Autism 101 Echo that we did through the university a couple years ago. We did 2 cycles of that, and they just wanted to learn more. Or we've really encouraged the physicians to self-refer themselves. They can join the Autism Diagnostic Echo at any time. We have a rolling format going on. Kind of the key to entry to that is that they'll complete a training on a secondary screening measure of autism, the STAT. And then once they have that certification, they'll join our monthly echoes. They have to present cases. They refer children on to us for confirmation visits while they're initially training. And really, we're trying to identify providers who may not necessarily just be right here on the Wasatch Front, where we're pretty rich in terms of our services, but really get some of those more rural serving pediatricians so that they can have that direct diagnostic relationship with individuals in their community. So if you know any, I'll put our Aspire email in the chat and feel free to share the information with them. We have a flyer I can send to Athena as well that kind of goes over broadly what that program is. But they are welcome to join anytime. And yeah, oh, Natalie's chiming in. Natalie's a participant with us. She's been with us for a couple years, so.
That's great. Yeah, and I'm taking notes as we're going through the meeting as well, and I try to send out all the links and stuff after the meeting, so we'll make sure and get all that information out to everybody about some of the programs and services you've heard today.
Some the barriers are kind of the same throughout the lifespan, you know, at least in my opinion. Cost is always going to be a barrier. You know, there's just, I don't know what the answer is to getting around that. We wish we could, you know, we love our folks with autism, and we wish we could take care of them and help them for free, but got to make a living. But especially for a lot of folks who are disabled or living on fixed incomes, you know, finding services that are affordable on a fixed income or a low income is really tricky. Maybe Eric has more to say about that.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one, Kari. The other barrier I think for accessing, a lot of times I've noticed, is transportation. That is one of our biggest barriers ever, because a lot of times people with disabilities have to get around to and from, and there's practically, like here on the Wasatch Front, we have the Utah Transit Authority, we got light rail, we got tracks, we got Ferner, but outside of outside of the Wasatch Front, there's nothing practically. There's no transportation, because that's one of our barriers to accessing those services as well, though. And then I think, and then also employment is one of our biggest issues too, because like I mentioned earlier, employment is one of those biggest barriers, because job seekers don't understand that people with disabilities can do the things they want. Because a lot of times employers are like, oh, okay, we'll put you to work like here. And they just don't get the chance to look at their skills that they offer, though.
That's great. Thank you for that input. We had a comment come into the chat that talked about the TV documentary reality series Love on the Spectrum really opened the door for autism being more talked about and understood, and was eye-opening for a lot of people. Autism in children is talked about frequently, but the series did a great job showing the struggles young adults, have that neurotypically developing people take for granted and don't really think about daily. I highly recommend watching it on Netflix if you haven't seen it, and I have seen it as well, and I agree. I'll put a plug in for that one as well. That was really well done. All right, well, those are the questions that we have prepared for our panel. Does anyone else want to chime in? And again, you can put them in the chat, you can unmute yourself. We're not so formal in this setting, so we do have about 15 minutes left or so, or actually probably about 10 minutes left or so before we need to wrap up the panel. If anyone has any other questions specific about any of the services or programs that were mentioned, or just general questions about autism services across the lifespan, you're welcome to ask those.
So let me ask a question here, because, we work with kids so frequently. So, we're talking kids under, 21, 22. Sometimes we break that barrier and we work with families who have slightly, some young adults. But for the most part, we're working with, parents who are advocating for their kids and, doing the very best they can, working with school districts and trying to get services for their kids. But if you are a young adult with autism and you're not tied into an organization like Scenic View, what sort of resources are out there to help advocate for you? Let's say maybe you have elderly parents or your parents are deceased and you are a young adult or an adult on the spectrum. Who can you turn to help advocate for you? Let's say maybe you're not confident enough, or you don't feel like you have enough of a voice, or you don't feel like you can fight for some of those things that you need. Who is out there to help? Those folks who kind of needs an ally on their side to maybe rally for them or help them get the things that they need.
Eric, you want to take that one first? You probably have a lot of good stuff to add.
How about you start, Corey, and I'll think about my answer for
Okay.
that one.
The first thing that came to mind for me was the universities. It's finally getting to the point where universities have autism clubs, where, one of the best things for autistic young adults is to meet and socialize with other autistic adults because they get them and they can show them strategies and show them, here's how I do this and here's how I make this work. And so we make sure that our students mix in with, like, the Utah Valley University has an autism club, BYU has an autism club. And so we actually host activities and invite those groups to our activities so that they're not just Scenic View students, they're, mixing with folks their own age from other organizations. So universities have lots of resources for students, and they're getting to the point where neurodivergence isn't so rare and unheard of, that most places have. UVU has the Passages program, which is designed specifically for folks on the spectrum that are going to college. That teaches them about autism and what it is, also gives them success strategies, gives them social opportunities. So that was the first thing that came to mind. But yeah, the more you could get them, introduce them to other autistic people, help them find autistic mentors, even if it's famous people with autism, like somebody that they can look at and go, hey, this person's really successful. They have the same thing that I do. I'm going to work towards that.
Now thinking back on what Kari said, here in Salt Lake, I think the only thing we have in Salt Lake is our Salt Lake County Park Recreation's Adaptive Recreation, and they offer all these social activities. They offer Saturday night dances, which is held between August and I know they're starting up their fall season. They go from August to December and then January to May. And that's a good place for people with autism to meet other people with autism as well. And then I think they also offer activities like they do. They also offer, besides the dances, they offer cooking classes, they offer bowling, they offer all these other activities along Salt Lake County for other people with autism and other disabilities to come and interact with each other. And I think that's all we have in Salt Lake County. I don't know of any elevated classes, but I wish the University of Utah did that. Athena, I think we should talk to you about starting one of those.
Tell me what the name of that was again. Sorry, Eric, I didn't catch it.
I was saying that I think it was Salt Lake County does all the social activities here in the Wasatch Front, but I think the University of Utah should start up one of those elevated programs and stuff, because that'd be really neat.
And is that the name of the program, is Elevated?
There's no elevated program for the University of Utah, I don't think.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, wish there was though.
Great. Any other questions for our panel today? Oh, Natalie chimed in on the chat that she thinks there's one at Utah State University.
And UVU has one as well.
And UVU has one too. Great. Abby chimed in on the chat that Independent Living Center, she said currently the Salt Lake County one is closed, but there are others across the state.
The one in Utah County is called Ability First. So Ability, the number 1 ST. Ability First, they kind of similar. They have activities. They provide transportation to and from their activities. They do cooking classes. They do outings. They're a really great resource.
I guess one thing I was going to say as well is I do know that Disability Law Center. So if there's any time, I guess there's a feeling of like discrimination with housing, or you're not making you're not getting the types of services that you feel you should be receiving. Quite often, reaching out to someone like Disability Law Center, they can go to bat for you for those types of things. I mean, they have a limited list of the types of advocacy they can provide. There are certain topics that they will, but I do know things like fair housing and that type of a situation, they will help folks with that. I guess I was just kind of looking overall, like, is there any sort of kind of does what we do, integrated services, someone that does some like care coordination or help really get folks like kind of connected from the professional advocacy side of things. I appreciate the peer, that peer support, because that is so important, that whole social bit with social isolation and all of the rest of it. We're just kind of looking at, any sort of organization that really will jump in and help, make those connections for, or mediate for, any sort of, helping with, getting folks connected with jobs or things like that. I know there's, Columbus is out there as well here in Salt Lake, and some of those organizations. And I think, quite often getting tied in with those groups will, they can help, get folks connected as well. I just kind of curious on that, on that adult side. Anyway, I appreciate it. I think it's a kind of an area to look at.
Yeah, there's just not much.
Okay.
Abby asked if there was anything maybe at Voc rehabilitation.
Yes.
Sorry, I guess I'll clarify. I was just thinking like that Voc, you might have to kind of, I was just thinking you might have to kind of combine all the services. You know, there's Voc Rehab, there's independent living centers, there's all the university things. So it just might be a combination of all of them, but I don't know of any service that does what you do, Eric, for adults. So I just really think it's about, other than maybe like DSPD, they do have, but again, that's the long wait list. So
Easter Seals has a employment program. Sorry, that just popped into my head.
Well, and I didn't want to perseverate on the issue, but I mean, it's so often is the case that we provide a lot of services and supports for folks up until they until they turn 18, and then there's that just that abyss that
Service
we
cliff.
yeah, and it's just tough. Like I have a 28-year-old with type 1 diabetes, and everybody's all about this cute little juvenile diabetics running around and wants to throw all their money at it. And as soon as you're an adult, you're on your own. And it's just interesting to see that is, that really is the case with all things from childhood to adult. And it's really a shame, to be perfectly honest.
Very frustrating.
I think we see that a lot here at the Parent Center, and that's why we've created the Transition University to kind of try and navigate those cliffs, and it's still hard. I still see every single day that parents are calling, what do I do with my adult child? What do we do now? What's next? So I think we're in the works, but not quite there yet.
There is a book that we often recommend to parents that was written by Temple Grandin and a psychotherapist, and it's called The Loving Push. And it's about that transition stage of how to help individuals on the spectrum navigate all those different things like work and relationships and mental health and all that kind of stuff. So that's not really a resource, but it's a recommendation. It's something that might help.
We'll call that a resource. We like
Okay.
including those on our lists of things for everyone. Well, we want to thank you all so much for participating in our panel today. This has been a really great discussion, and I think we've all learned a lot and maybe heard new services that we weren't aware of, and we'll want to check out further. So before we wrap up, I do have we've started doing a monthly evaluations. I want to make sure people remember to fill out your evaluation before you log off the meeting. So I've just launched that poll. It'll be there for you to answer questions. I'll keep it open for about 3 or 4 minutes. And then as you're filling that out, a reminder of our next meeting will be on July 17th. And that our learning session topic for that meeting will be all about special education resources, the nuts and bolts of IEPs and 504s. And so we encourage you to come to that one. And then in the meantime, of course, you can always stay in touch via our listserv. You can send questions directly to this email and it distributes to the entire list. If you've got cases or resources or need advice on anything, that's a great place to share that information. And then we also have the UCCCN Facebook group going. You can post announcements there as well, or share resources also there. So thank you everyone for joining us today, and we will see you all in July. Stay cool.